So we'll call today's special Sustainability and Resiliency Council meeting to order at 4:06 and start with silent meditation and the pledge.
Okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America
and
to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
nation
under God, indivisible,
with
liberty and justice for all.
Okay, and we'll go right into roll call.
Thank you very much. Roll call. Member Valencia is not here. Member Fruitstone, not here. Member Webb.
Present.
Vice Chairperson McLean.
Present.
Chairperson Carpenter.
Present.
Madam Chair, you do have a quorum. Madam Chair, for the record, we do have Village Manager Christia Liu here. We have from Serbia, we have Juan Millarat, and we have Camila Zabla here. We do have Katkin Flowers here, who is a friend and associate of Mr. Hugh Gladwin, who acts as a consultant for our task force. And that's what we have here currently. We also have Adam Old here. Adam Old, who is a environmental juggernaut that we have here with us. So we have all these individuals here, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, for the record, I would just like to say that I think that once our Public Works Director, Mohan, comes on, which he should be coming on pretty soon, I believe that the best way to get started is that we should have Juan and Camilla from Serbia kind of give an overview of what charrette master plan looks like, because they do charrettes all the time. So they're experts at that, just so we kind of get a feel of like what that is. After that, I think that Mohan should introduce himself and kind of say, you know, what he does if he's here at that time. Then
Let me open that.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to say that he's saying someone has to let him in to the meeting. He's waiting.
Oh, everybody else. Is he using the public link?
I just forwarded him the link that I was given. I don't know if that was public.
Yeah, which was the public link. You were given the public link.
Okay, so
I
don't
know.
Colin's trying to get into, but I gave him Kristen's link.
Okay.
So we'll have another Kristen soon.
All right.
Okay, yeah, there's no chat.
Never know.
If full moon, if you
Is this a Zoom or a team? The one I got is a team.
Zoom.
it's a Zoom. Full moon, if you see Mohan Thampi, if you could just let him have access. I'm not sure what's going on with him. He's having problems on that end. Madam Chair, so I believe that for Serbia Design, Juan and Camilla should give an overview of what a charrette is, so that we all understand kind of what we're looking for in the charrette. Mohan, if he's here, should introduce himself, say what he does, and then Kristen and I don't see Colin yet, but if Colin,
He's coming in. Yep, he'll be here.
but Kristen and Colin, they have a slideshow that more details like what we're looking for in environmental charrette, and it kind of like brings together also what our objectives kind of kind of what it should be. I sent an email out earlier. Hopefully everybody got to read it. Just kind of like the questions that we should kind of be looking at, so we kind of stay focused and kind of stay on task, because something like this is so big that if we get off task, it could be a very long meeting. Then we'll end up looking back at the end of the meeting and realize that we didn't really get to any concrete, like, focused action items that we need to come out of from here. So we need action items coming out of here, Madam Chair. That being said, I'll be back. I'll try to be back as quickly as possible before the meeting's over. If I don't make it back, Madam Chair, at the end of the agenda where we usually go over the open items, we don't have to do that for this meeting because it's a special meeting, Madam Chair. Okay. Thank you guys very much. I'll be back as soon as I can, you guys. I appreciate it, and you guys have a wonderful meeting. Take care.
Thanks, Omar.
Bye-bye.
Really quickly, Manager, was your hand for do you have another question? Was that for getting Public Works in? You're good.
That was only to alert you for that. I'll lower it, and he's in now. He says, but I don't see him.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, well, really quickly before we jump in, let's just quickly approve the agenda. It's a special meeting, so I think we can just skip that. And we're not going over meetings. We have on the record everybody, all of the visitors we have in. I don't see no other attendees besides all of who I'm seeing in front of us for good and welfare. And then we can jump right into the agenda item, which is today's environmental charrette master plan. And I think that Mayor Nickerson outlined the perfect first step. If Serbia wouldn't mind doing a quick overview of what this process entails and what we're, our scope and how limited we are by CDMP and other regulations.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So I wasn't really sure what to prepare for this meeting. The mayor asked me to give you an insight as to what a charrette is and how it's done. I believe that at this point, everybody has at some point or another in their life been to a charrette. I have prepared a couple of slides, so you don't mind, I'll share, and I'll skip over the ones that I prepared in anticipation of presenting more, but in the interest of time and everybody's afternoon, I'll keep it simple.
Perfect. Do you need permission to share, or do you have that already?
I do not. I think I have that already.
Okay, great.
So again, I prepared a whole bunch of slides about resiliency and how, we are all going to be underwater at some point or another in the future. I'm sure that you guys have been discussing this for some time now, so I'm going to skip those. A charrette at the end of the day is a group of people getting together and discussing the future of a place. And the most important things are, and I always give the ground rules at the end of my presentations. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
I assume you can.
Yep.
And at the very end, the most important thing is that you speak with your pens. And this is not just so that we keep a record of the things that are discussed during a charrette, but also because it diffuses certain situations where if you have to write with your pen, your discussion is actually more fluid, and it brings you to a to either consensus or, well, always consensus, whether you agree or you agree to disagree. But there is always consensus, and it's always on paper. Positive interactions, everybody's opinion counts, of course. We live in a democracy, so that's really important. The charrette design is really secondary. It's really about ideas being put on paper and discussed. And typically the designers are just facilitators. So the important thing is that stakeholders have a voice. And so what typically the facilitators do is just transfer ideas into paper, into maps, etc. And always to think outside the box. It's the worst thing that can happen is at the beginning of a project, things are dismissed just because they seem irrelevant. And at the end of the project, or at the end of the, of whatever the charrette is about, you start thinking about, why didn't I propose A, B, and C? So think big, everybody's opinion counts, and there's no bad ideas, never in a charrette. Other than that, like I told you, I have a whole bunch of things that we are preparing for another municipality in terms of sea level rise and resiliency. I'm going to skip all those. Again, in terms of the charrette, very simple, but I'll entertain any questions that you may have. And Camila is there as well, who has just as much experience on charrettes as I do.
Thank you so much. Camila, did you have anything to add, or you're just, I didn't know if you had anything else to add on top of that.
Just out of curiosity, has anybody never been to a charrette before, or a public workshop? Sometimes they're called public workshops. I know Adam has.
I have.
Good. If I would be surprised if anybody has never been to a charrette, because again, this is the way that planning works, and anybody who has been involved in city planning or a stakeholder, has been to a one.
Actually, can I ask a basic question? Just because
Sure.
in the pre-planning for this meeting and the background conversations, is a charrette a single meeting, or is a charrette a larger process? Because that was part of, I think, when we proposed this discussion of this initiative at our last task force meeting, I think one of the ideas or one of the things about that was that we weren't entirely sure what we were going to end up with, that this was the start of a discussion of what this could be. And hopefully by the end of this meeting today, we'll have a little bit of more clarity on where we want to take this process and whether or not the committee wants to take this up. But can a charrette be a single meeting, or does it have to be an extended community process?
That's a great question. A charrette is not necessarily a meeting. A charrette is a process to elicit public opinion. So it can have many different. You can take many different strategies for it, depending on how complicated the item or issue, or either how complex or how contentious it is. You might want to do one or multiple ones. In case of resiliency, for instance, which is the one that you guys are looking at, my recommendation is that you would have multiple days. One day might just be informational. Another day might be smaller group workshops within one room where people are working out potential solutions. So it could be a number of days. Whenever we do large cities, we do 5 to 7 day charrettes. So it really depends on what the process and what, how you want to how you want to approach the stakeholders.
Well, I hope that by the end of this meeting that we'll actually have a better sense of what it is that we're talking about. Because I think it's an open question. Okay. When you're, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, Kristen, to interrupt. I'm just thinking that depending on what outcome you guys want, I'll be happy to take a look and recommend, how to approach the public. Hands-on charrettes are very helpful, and not everybody's available during the weeks. And so at the very least, I would do one weeknight and one weekend morning. So let's just say a Thursday evening after work, and then a Saturday morning, and do 2 sessions at the very least. That way you will probably be able to capture as many stakeholders as possible.
Okay, I think, Elizabeth, depending on what you think, it might be helpful at this point to just, Colin and I have prepared, and Colin is going to present a kind of background document that is going to provide some basis for discussion, and is kind of remind us of a bunch of the different things that we have talked about within this committee and kind of pull them into the frame of this conversation. And I think it might be helpful to go over that so that we should get all that background information out. And then at that point, we can talk about what we think we're talking about. I think of this as kind of more of a pre-charrette conversation or a pre-project conversation to just try to define the scope of what it is that we think we want to go after.
I think that sounds great. I'm wondering if, before we do that and what we have Pluserbia, I was just going to address the mayor's first 2 questions, which are what should be a part of a charrette and what shouldn't, and how detailed they should be. But I don't know what your presentation looks like. If you feel like that should be a question we talk about afterwards. Okay.
No, let's for the sake of the record, let's talk about that now, and then we can circle back on it once we get into the other part of the conversation.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll direct that at Pluserbia, if you all wouldn't mind addressing what should be a part of a charrette and what shouldn't, and then how detailed should a charrette master plan be?
What should be in a charrette, it really depends on what you want to get out of the charrette. So again, because people get tired of planning, you want to get as much information as you can from the stakeholders. You basically have one chance, because if you have multiple charrettes over a long period of time, people start losing interest. So what should be in a charrette really depends on what you want to get out of it. And let me say this once again, the charrette is not the project, right? The charrette is a process by which you elicit information from stakeholders. Then you take that information and you develop it through your analysis and through the information that you receive from the stakeholders in order to come up with a solution that includes public opinion as well as the analysis that you've done.
Visible, and we don't want any spoilers.
Okay, I wonder if the question was really Matthew, do you mind muting yourself? Thank you. I wonder if the question was really what should be part of a master plan, like a charrette master plan, which I think he was getting at. What is the end product here? What should be a part of our final document, and how detailed should that be?
So what is your final document? What are you looking to communicate with your final document?
I think that's exactly I think that those are exactly the questions that we want to discuss in the course of this and perhaps a successive meeting.
So why don't we jump right into your all's presentation then, but really quickly, Mr. Gladwin, you have your hand up.
Sure, no problem. Oh, they should
And
go
I hate
ahead.
to answer.
Oh, okay.
I hate to answer a question with a question, but I think it's easier to work backward.
Totally understood. Well, great. That's why we're all here. So, Kristen, take it away.
I just want to go back to what Omar asked. Do we want to introduce the Public Works
Yes, thank
person
you.
first? Yep.
Yes, thank you so much. Mohan, I believe it is. Are you with it? Perfect. I'd love to have you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing.
He's muted.
Oh, was it me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I'm like acting as the Public Works Director since what?
January.
Yeah, January.
This is Mohan Thampi. He is our
Right.
Public Works Director through CAP Government. He's with us
Right.
part-time, but he's a senior engineer with CAP. So you can tell him about some of the projects you're working on with us, Mohan.
Yeah, so I've been assisting Christia with various projects, and actually those have been the stormwater project for which we have a grant, and I think we are in the final stages to get it executed. So we have that going on, and then the other project is, well, I guess it's a septic to sewer, which is converting some of the septic tanks to sewer, which will help in preventing runoff. From when you have high water flooding. So those are the two main projects we have right now. And then I assist in the NPDES permits, the reports and other stuff. But right now with the available funding, what we have is those two projects. To the one with the CDBG grant is to what is it? Alleviate flooding by regrading the roads and swales. The other one is the septic to sewer is basically to prevent pollution of the canal, the waterways, the Biscayne Bay. So those are the two, but again, we are limited by funding and have to rely on grants. So we don't have a tax base to do that. So
and I just want to add to tomorrow we'll be meeting with the Biscayne Bay. I think she's calling herself a Bay officer, chief Bay officer. So Mohan will be working with us on that, whatever those next steps are.
Is that Arella Bagway?
Yes.
Yeah.
But also we're, we're applying for a number of other grants as well. In fact, we're applying for the DEP Wastewater Grant, again, that's due on the 22nd. So Mohan's working on that. The DEP Biscayne Bay Grant, we don't know what our project will be, but it's probably going to be one of the many things that we're always asking for, which is outfalls and what have you. So We have Mohan and then our consultant from Craig A. Smith working on those grant submittals right now. And then we are doing, what's the other one? Oh gosh, it's the wastewater, Biscayne Bay and something, and a parks. We'll be submitting a request for parks grant too, because, we do have that developers fees that we're using to do the parks renovation, but we're trying to, apply for as many grants as possible. And since there, is mostly a match request with
Yeah.
these grants. And so we want to double our efforts in that way. So we're just trying to get the funding, in place, but we have Mohan and his team to help support the work.
But not to forget, El Jardin, you just completed.
El Jardin, right.
So we
Right.
had,
So with, with the LMS funding we just got, we were able to find that we could use what we've already done in El Jardin to be the match for that 900,000. So we do have to come up with about almost 300,000, but I think that's a lot easier than coming up with 800,000 as the match. So we're being creative, but it's working. So.
Sorry, Madam Manager, so I know that the El Jardin project was completed, minus an outfall, but what is the next project that this funding is going towards in terms of stormwater?
the CDBG grant project is the flood. Yeah. Again, that's regrading.
No, Mohan, she's asking about the next phase of El Jardin.
Or the next project in the village. I don't know.
Okay.
The next phase of El Jardin.
Then that would be what Mohan's mentioning, that septic to sewer, but we also have something else in the pipeline for El Jardin Part 2.
Okay. In terms of stormwater, though, you're saying regrading and upgrading swales. Is that across the village or in
No.
a particular area?
It's limited. I think it's the southwest area.
Okay. And okay, so that's our next stormwater project. And then in terms of septic to sewer, what's the progress on that as applied to, the.
Well, I think, that's been going on for a few years, but I think we are in the final, we have to get the consultant to complete it. And I think, Christia, you had some issues regarding, have you paid all the easements and all that stuff?
For this meeting, guys.
Yeah, we actually have paid the first installment. We're waiting for the grant agreement from Miami-Dade Public Schools now. And so
Mr. Glavin, I'm not trying to get into the specifics, just to respond to your comment, but I think it is important to know what is on deck and already paid for, because I think that gets incorporated into our planning as well. So we probably are spending too much time on this, but I just wondered if, we had a plan to, now we're moving forward to the new septic to sewer project that we weren't aware of, or if there had been any changes in that sense.
No. What we've already reported, we're working, these are active projects. It's just we haven't started construction on that septic to sewer, but the easement has been paid, or the first installment's been paid. Certain things have to happen for the next installment to come, but all of that money has been earmarked, and we just need to get there with the consultant to complete the design.
If you'll excuse me, I'm very sorry, but this is a special meeting. What you're doing now is like regular business. It should be on the agenda for next week's meeting.
No, I know,
and
Mr.
we're
Glavin,
taking
that's
time
okay.
away on irrelevant topics that don't have anything to do with. So I'm sorry, but that's what I think.
No, I understand, Mr. Glavin. That's what I was saying. I know that the Public Works Department joined us just to give us a status, because I think what we have in mind for septic to sewer and what we have in mind for stormwater is important to understand to go into this charrette. Like that baseline information, I think is important to me to be able to do the next step. But I think we just received it. And so we can move to Colin and Kristen's presentation, but I do think that's important information, and I appreciate you all sharing it.
Well, I think that I think that this actually underlines a really interesting, I just want to take a couple minutes to set up what Colin is going to share with us. So, I don't know if you've ever been in an amusement park where you see a carny like grab a moving, merry-go-round. That's kind of what this process feels like a little bit, because we have a bunch of stuff in process. And we're also trying to capture the momentum of what's going on and to try to kind of wrestle it into something bigger. And so that really is the point of this special meeting. And I think all of the stakeholders here, plus many others who are not with us on this call right now, are going to touch what ultimately we're going to be talking about today. So just as a reminder, in our last meeting, I brought forward the idea that perhaps there was an opportunity for the village to entertain some kind of master planning process, and what form it takes, what the the ultimate just what is in it is, I think all we're just on the very starting point of that discussion. But it did seem to me when I brought it forward that there are many things that are coming together at the same time to make this a really unique moment for the village and an opportunity where the village can have a very outsized impact and also move its own agenda down the road for its residents and for the adjacent communities. We all know that this is a very complicated, particularly complicated basin because of all of the entities, agencies, communities that are involved and have a stake in the river, not to mention the ecology and the manatees and everybody else. So, and for those of us like Hugh and Adam and I have been working on this for years now, like trying to balance all the complexity of those stakeholders has been a major challenge. And right now, I think there is a really unique kind of coming together, an alignment of state, county, agency, and local concerns that make this really unique. So what I asked with Colin's help, I wanted to put together a background document that just pulls together elements of things that we have already talked about within the scope of this committee, but in such a way that it provides a foundation for the conversation about what the opportunity is and whether or not this committee wants to go after it and make recommendations to the village. So Colin did all this great work. So I want to turn it over to him, and he'll take us through all of the pieces that we've pulled together just to provide a context for the conversation. So.
Thank you, Kristen. Do I have the ability to share my screen?
I think you should.
Okay, perfect.
And actually, Colin, could you just, for a moment, could you just introduce yourself in case there's anyone on this call who doesn't know who you are?
Of course. My name is Colin Brown. I'm a landscape architect. I moved into El Portal back in October of 2021. I was in Coconut Grove for the better part of my time in Miami, almost 4 years. I'm originally from Montana. I approach landscape architecture with an appreciation of the environmental lens and a lot of the data that goes into creating these natural spaces and ecological restoration, preservation, and conservation. I approached the mayor back in early 2022, and he immediately got me in touch with some folks at the Little River Conservancy, the Sustainable Task Force. And since then, it's been a little bit of a snowball effect where all of us are realizing that these issues that have been discussed and charrettes that have been done over the past 10 years, AAA plan that's been put together recently and released in January, we're reaching a point where people are looking for immediate action. And this was an opportunity for me to get involved and to try to further this agenda, and to also use my professional background from New York and Chicago, working through different charrettes and park designs to try to be a guiding force and bringing together this massive amount of information to get a process going. So that is my introduction. And with that, I will start my presentation. Can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
This is my wife on Little River, a couple days after moving in, heading out for a paddleboard. No need to elaborate here. It's a special place, and there's a lot of development and natural elements that could threaten this corridor moving forward. So I put together a quick summary of somebody, through the lens of a landscape architect, kind of dropping into this and saying, okay, what are the stakeholders? What is some of the research that's been done to date? And then what is some of the work that I've done, and what is some other reputable work that's been done recently that we can use as precedent? And how can we look at what's happening in El Portal and focus on areas as a catalyst for what the Little River Conservancy works towards, what the Resiliency Task Force work towards, and this overarching environmental agenda that we embrace in El Portal. So I'm going to cruise through some of this pretty quickly because it's more of hitting a refresh button on a lot of this information, because it kind of takes us across these stepping stones that bring us to where we are today. And where we are today is to try to figure out what information we have that is going to allow us to come together and serve as a conduit to get us to the next step. So the AAA adaptation must actions list is make us safer, be equitable, reduce environmental pollution, be flexible, build with nature, and align with other initiatives. This is accomplished through various approaches, like build like the Keys, build on higher ground around transit, expand greenways and blueways, build on fill, create green and blue neighborhoods. Building on fill is a simple concept of building on higher ground and avoiding flooding in specific areas. Build like the Keys is the simple concept of raising the homes as they do in the Keys. Build on high ground around transit is the idea that the transit is important and that these new developed spaces can be green and sustainable. Expand greenways and bluesways is the concept that different parks throughout the region can be used as green infrastructure to treat our polluted stormwater and ultimately clean the riparian corridor. Create green and blue neighborhoods is another stepping stone within the same concept of creating sustainable communities within the corridor. There's a ton of data. I took some data and some information that I thought was relevant as I reviewed the document. Tree canopy, impervious versus impervious areas. There's two main threats that are polluting the Little River corridor: septic and stormwater pollution from the roadways. The impacts of flooding that we all see along the Little River corridor and has been discussed extensively to date. It's documented beautifully in this document. And the flood frequency map. We cannot address all the flood problems all at once. This needs to be a moment in which we target specific areas and come together and figure out how mitigation approaches for a specific zone can help the overall corridor, and how that can serve as a pilot for other areas in the corridor, so that we can protect this special area. The El Portal Archaeological Zone is a zone within El Portal that there was a archaeological report given back in 1983 that there were excavations done at the Native American mound, and there was a Native American village along the north and south end of Little River. It's something that we need to acknowledge and moving forward, that this is another layer, another complexity that we must embrace in our process, but it can also identify what we're trying to achieve. Historical references of how these people used to live on the river and within the bay, and sacred burial mounds that are located within El Portal. The Little River Conservancy, I've been talking weekly with Hugh Gladwin and Kristen and Adam, and trying to understand their agendas and how I can serve them to conserve the Little River and to work with the village for the greater good of El Portal. There's an insane amount of site-specific information that's generated from the Little River Conservancy. Hugh Gladwin is a database of information that I can't believe that he is able to access the amount of information through GIS. whether it's sheet flow information such as this, or specific topographic information, flood information, functions of the S27 drainage structure, and the history of the Little River corridor. He's provided, and the Little River Conservancy has provided historical references to allow us to better understand what this corridor was and what has led it to where it is today. Our most recent discussions have been involving manatees and the fact that this is an endangered species. This is an endangered species that's under an incredible amount of pressure right now. And, there are specific areas in the Little River corridor that serve as breeding grounds for manatees and could be areas of special interest, both from a restoration standpoint and from a biological study standpoint. There's a stormwater facilities plan that was put out. It's almost a 400-page document. It's incredibly extensive, but it also serves as a building block to, where are we? What are the areas of concern along the corridor and on the north end of El Portal? How are these basins divided? And what information do we have on them to date? And what further information do we need in order to put together solution-based concepts, green infrastructure concepts that can enhance biodiversity and also solve some of the flood problems in El Portal while keeping the Little River clean. West of Northeast 2nd Ave, there's a few quick graphics here that I snipped from the report that shows some of the information that we have about the drainage in the Southwest Basin. And I know that there was work previously discussed in El Jardín. But you can see that, such as the Southeastern Basin, that there's a flood problem in this area. There's one drain outlet here that could be a driving factor in a green infrastructure resolution in this location in the years to come. The Northeastern Basin is also an area that is collecting, it's an area of concern, and the Little Farm Basin is a massive vacant parcel that's going to be up for development in coming years, and it has the potential to store and alleviate flood problems within this region. With that, I just wanted to walk you through some work that I've done that talks about, the initial design process, the word and the concept of charretting and getting other stakeholders involved and understanding, how the designer, the landscape architect, the master planner, the architect really serves as a hand for stakeholders. And this is a moldable concept in which everybody vests their interests and for the better outcome of the neighborhood.
Colin, can I just say one thing before you get rolling on this next section?
Yes.
So as we listen to this next section, for those who are on the call and also anybody who's listening after the fact, I'm really hoping that the next few sections serve to spark the imagination a little bit. I think that, we have this perception of ourselves. We think we punch above our weight, and we do in El Portal, but also we have this feeling that we're a very small cog in a much larger, political and geographic location. And that's true, but we also have a real opportunity. This is really, and so I'm hoping that these things will kind of spark the imagination a little bit and get us thinking about what's possible. So go ahead.
Yeah, and to build off that, something that has not been discussed or diagrammed to date is the idea of water retention and detention. And in peak rain events, how can we hold rainwater in specific areas that ultimately allows the water to percolate through the porous limestone, restore the aquifer, and or also re-enter the Little River corridor as clean fresh water. So some of these diagrams that I've put together and precedent projects, I'm hoping will paint a picture for what is possible and for future projects here in El Portal. This is a project that I did on a conceptual level in North Beach. This is Ocean Terrace here, and it's a parking lot next to the library in North Beach. And it's a concept of how we can take a parking lot and recreate an ecology that has been bulldozed and flattened, 50 years ago, 80 years, 100 years ago, and recreate a public nature interface, and also allow for stormwater retention, which promotes biodiversity and encourages interface between nature and the general public. So it's a very urban environment, tons of parking, tons of traffic. I'm sure that the first 1 inch of rainfall that comes off the hardscape, the impermeable surface here, and into the storm drains is polluted, and the majority of it is being shot straight into the bay, adding to our problem. Part of the research that I would do on a project like this is, what are the primary site ecologies? What are these planting matrices? What was existing here before? And how do we recreate that in a way that's sustainable and low maintenance and simple? And so here's a little bit, this could easily be tied into charretting and presentations. The first one up top here is a hand drawing of the park. It shows the parking lot is, just to give a quick reference here, this is the bathroom here that can be referenced here in both of these drawings. This drawing, the point of it is to recreate a high dune system with a lawn on top that allows for views of the ocean. It allows for bikers and pedestrians to run and jog through the site and inhabit lawn in different areas, but also has low-lying areas that can collect and detain stormwater. There's different drawings and different ideas that come to the table. One is a full park concept, and the other one is a park concept in which they want to keep the existing library and explore options of making this a restaurant, or making this a brewery, or making this some sort of retail. So the drawer and the designer and the landscape architect or the design team is very reactive to the stakeholders involved. There's a plan development, an idea that's decided, and models are generated that allow people to better understand what this system looks like. So here we have the same higher lawn area with paths. The dark green would be lawn. The lighter green is planting area, and the purple is contours. The circulation throughout the site is hybridized with hardscape and boardwalk that runs over lower detention areas. There's a water feature in front with an ADA accessible ramp next to the bus stop that's going to create a sense of tranquility as you enter the site. This is the view from the southeast, looking at this elevated dune system. A view from the northeast, looking at the elevated dune system from the other side. And then setting the site within site context of impervious surfaces and how this can serve as a green infrastructure element on North Beach. This site has the ability to capture up to 135,000 gallons of rainwater. If it rains 1 inch, the site can receive runoff from approximately 2.5 acres of impermeable surfaces. And what it does is it creates a site that is ever evolving and reacting to the seasons. What this does is creates a site that's rich in biodiversity with varying ecologies to restore some of the biodiversity that's been lost in the region due to heavy development. We have a wetland that is almost permanently wet at the lower elevations of the site around contour 4 or 5. And then we have an emergent wetland that's wet seasonally with emergent wetland plants. There are transitional ecologies that occur at the edge of the emergent wetland and between the shady upland ecology. At the top of the dune here, around the lawn, we have a xeric dune ecology that represents a drier, dune forward plant palette that is much different than a hydric based plant palette here on the other end. The next two slides, or the next two projects, are two finished projects done by other landscape architecture firms. This is the first project that I'd like to review is the Duke University Reclamation Pond by Nelson Bird's Wiltz Landscape Architects. Like so many developed sites, there's a degraded stormwater drainage system that's filled with invasive plants that captures rainwater from 265 acres throughout the campus. And Duke was talking about creating an engineered pond surrounded by a chain link fence that would serve as a retention pond to be used for irrigation and potable water. This is a site plan that the landscape architect came forward with within the same drainage basin that we just looked at the previous slide. You can see that there's boardwalks for engagement with the riparian edge. There's pavilions that you can sit in while it's raining, and there's also jogging paths throughout the site that are created artfully amongst native plantings. This is what the site looks like finished. It shows that there are still channelized engineered systems, but they're set within a thoughtful context of native plant palettes that enhance biodiversity and foster interface with the general public. This is a project that oftentimes is seen as, it's either developing the site for one purpose or, such as housing or parking, or, developing the site for drainage. But there's no reason why there can't be hybrid models that that enhance the value of the property adjacent to these parks. This next is a stormwater. This is a Kinley Stormwater Park in China by Turinscape. This is a 6,700 acre new urban district. It receives 22 inches of rain the months June, July, and August that account for 60 to 70 inches of the rainfall annually. The landscape architect was hired to design this 84-acre park. It has the ability to retain 500,000 cubic meters of rainfall that ultimately allows native plant communities to grow, fosters biodiversity, and recharges the aquifer within the urban district. You can see that here is a landscape concept that was put forward that looks at different wetland areas and how sky pavilions and skywalks, pavilions, and towers can be integrated with existing wetlands to create a park within a denser urban context. Here are photos of the park itself, and you can see that there's heavy development around the edge of the park, and this is high valued area, very similar to Central Park in New York. This brings us to the El Portal areas of focus that I have discussed with various stakeholders to date. There's the Little Farm development that is, it's that question, what's going to happen to this, and the ability for green infrastructure to be implemented into this site. There's a Cavista riverfront development that was recently purchased by the same developer who's developing Cavista here adjacent. He is interested in developing with an environmental focus. There's vacant area adjacent to the S27 structure. There's the Pelican Harbor Seabird Station that is being planned as we speak. And there's also a very special property here, 400 Northeast 85th Street, that I think somebody else should introduce. But there's an opportunity for a sustainable and environmental agenda to be generated from this property as well. With that being said, I'll pass it over to Kristen. That was a lot of information. Thank you for bearing with me. I'll move to the next slide once you're ready, Kristen.
Thanks. So I just wanted to put a couple slides at the end here just to gather all of the bullets of the background into one place. So depending on what we decide to do and what we want to take on, I think what the potential is, what we're maybe advocating for here is for the village to develop a master plan with a charrette maybe. I think that there are potentially multiple strategies that might help us figure out the best solution for the areas of interest that Colin has just outlined. But I just wanted to pull together why this is such, I think, an auspicious or like critical moment for this. So just to go over how a master plan that advances the village's goals would also intersect the Little River AAA put forward by the county, right? We have the opportunity to reinforce and develop under the AAA, under the bullets of creating blue-green neighborhoods, expanding blueways and greenways, and building on fill, potentially. We can go a long way towards codifying the village's actual plan for managing the archaeological assets that we have in the village. We've had them, but we've never really put them at the center of a plan in a really formal way. And I think this moment, centering the archaeological sites and our obligation to them, is another way of us putting a stake in the ground to make sure that we can't just be bulldozed over by a solution that doesn't take these things into account. In terms of the Little River and Pelican Harbor, it would, trying to develop a plan that would move these initiatives forward would allow the village to lead on ecological development in a really visionary way. Colin, would you mind going back to them? I'm good, but I'm not that good. Okay. Or no, back one slide. There you go. It will allow us for the village to take a lead on the ecological restoration and preservation of the Little River and of assets that are within the village borders. It will allow us to improve water quality through green infrastructure. It will allow us to address the manatees in the river that are a really important and I think emotionally moving touchstone for anybody who comes in contact with them. That's totally aligned with our partners at Pelican Harbor across the river. We already have our own stormwater plan, which is very comprehensive, but if we consider some kind of innovative green development, particularly in the little farm area, it would provide us a positive, measurable addition to our existing stormwater plan. And then by creating this type of document in detail and having it available to represent what the village wants and mandating in some cases, it will make it much less likely that other entities can come along behind and try to plug in something else along the river that doesn't align with what we're doing, or at least it will make it much more difficult for them to do that. So I think that is in the best interest of the village and the residents. So can you go to the next slide, Colin? Yes. So in addition, I think that, there's a lot of conversation and we have to balance the priorities of lots of stakeholders here, right? Including our own residents in the village. But I think that taking some of the examples that Colin has brought forward, there's the potential that with a master plan that looks at some of this blue-green initiative, that we could actually raise the tax base and raise the value of the properties. And we know from our conversations with Cavista that they would very much like to see that because they believe that this type of solution will actually improve the value and the desirability of what they're developing. And I think that would be true for any developer that comes into a little farm. It will give us some concrete plans to further try to unlock some funding tied to resilience, which is of the moment, demonstrate our leadership at a key political moment, draw additional partnerships and resources from places that we haven't even thought about yet, and then just create additional green space in the village, which is so important, I think, to the quality of the community. And then I just want to also let Hugh, just for the record, talk a little bit about his property that Colin referenced just a minute ago, just to kind of put the final piece of background in place before we move forward on the next part of the discussion. Do you want to talk, Hugh, about the Ecostation Park? You seem to be muted, Hugh, even though it says you're not muted in the meeting.
this button on my headset.
There you are.
Yeah. So we've had that idea for a long time. I mean, my house property here, it's almost an acre. It's at this bend of the little river. So my wife, Mary, and I, we've had this idea we've talked about of having it, the land get purchased by something like the Trust for Public Land to become a park where people can come and view the river at a beautiful location where scientific monitoring of river water quality can take, and where it could also be like a museum for the village and the archaeological areas. So, so I think it's a very promising idea, and Colin has sort of taken over the idea of, over the thing of implementing it along the lines that he's talked already, to become a park. And then Katkin, my niece, who's an expert in these things, has taken on the project of developing long-term programming that would make it self-sustaining. And a lot of different things have come together in those elements, and it's very promising. I mean, the bottom line is, for something like that, is that the village can't afford to do this, pay for this project at all. So it has to be, every aspect of it has to be self-financing, and I am now becoming very positive about that, but it fits into everything else. So that's it on that.
Kristen, you're muted.
Yeah, so I think the question, so that concludes our background, and a little bit of a invitation to the committee and to our partners who are on the call to envision what we could do with this opportunity, and what is the most strategic and effective way to execute on it once we decide we want to do it. I think we've talked about a master plan, we talked about a charrette. We know the village has some control over things like zoning, although I think, there's, I don't know what's the most effective way to move forward, but in terms of what the final package is, back to Juan and the initial question at the start of this special meeting. But it's my hope that this meeting, within the scope of this meeting, that we can have a little bit of a discussion about this idea, the idea of creating a plan. Or creating a pre-plan, because I'm assuming this would have to go to council for consideration. Questions about funding, questions about effective strategies, questions about deliverables, questions about process. I think those are all in front of us. So the most fundamental question is whether or not the committee wants to take it on, and then tackle all of that.
I would love to provide a couple comments on your all's wonderful presentation, but maybe it's more effective right now to use our Placerbia expertise on what a final master plan would look like, and what kind of buy-in from our codes and CDMP and village council we would need to create a final, actionable master plan.
Is that a call to me?
Yes.
So I think that the key word here you just mentioned is actionable, right? A master plan is not actionable. A master plan captures those ideas. I think that what's actionable would be, as you mentioned, the comprehensive plan and the zoning code. The comprehensive plan would probably be first, or it could probably be done at the same time, both zoning and comp plan. Comp plan would capture those goals and objectives that we're looking for, and then the zoning code would be updated. It's actually a good time right now because we are undergoing some edits to the zoning code anyways. And the master plan should really inform in which way those two documents need to be updated. And I'm talking really about the level of aggressiveness that we, or maybe not aggressive is too harsh a word, but how realistic we want to be and how do we want to implement those resilient measures for the future of the village. I can tell you, Key Biscayne has been ahead of the curve in many ways, raising buildings, an extra floor. Miami Beach is looking at doing the same thing. We are fortunate, I guess, in El Portal that not the whole village is in the same situation. We have a little bit more topography, but there are, of course, as you guys have highlighted, areas that are prone to flooding already. And as Public Works mentioned, there are some infrastructure projects already moving forward, and they will probably tackle, some of the problems in the short and maybe medium timeline, but maybe not the long range. So going back, the master plan should recommend how it needs to be implemented, and then comprehensive plan would capture that in legal language, and then the zoning code would be updated at the same time. Camila, do you have any additional comments or?
No, just to be sure, I think the most important part in starting the charrette is knowing exactly, being prepared and kind of knowing what topics need to be addressed and when. Just to add to what you've said, that would be part of the preparation. That would be essential to getting the outcome that you want out of the meeting.
As a follow-up, what level of detail would you need to see in a master plan in order to make those CDMP and code adjustments? Does it need to just be a rough outline of an idea, or do we need to get designs and, down to the nitty-gritty to make that effective?
I think, Camila mentioned the preparation. I think that we need to ask the right questions during the charrette to elicit input. How do you feel about, currently you're allowed 2 stories in residential. So if you have if you raise your building, right, you're going to have neighbors that build new structures and they are in essence 3 stories high. I'm just giving you an example. So we need to ask those questions so that we get feedback from the stakeholders to guide the master plan, and then that master plan would guide the comprehensive plan and the zoning code. But we need to ask those questions. I think in terms of detail, as much detail as we can, of course, from the residents. I have to say, and some of you are professionals in the field, there is a professional filter that is then applied to stakeholder input, right? There are things that are feasible and there are things that are not feasible, and we need to be critical about what the information that we receive. And then the master plan needs to be presented, get opinion. So there will be feedback loops between charrette to master plan to code. In terms of detail, to be direct to your question, as much as we can. The more detailed that we are, and the more specific we are asking questions to the residents, the less surprises later on.
I was going to ask Adam if he has any input or any thoughts.
So my main thought is, what are we trying to achieve? And I'm assuming that we're trying to change the zoning code and the CDMP. And if that's the case, how does our fantastical master plan interact with the existing zoning? Because the way it works right now, a lot of the land that is under discussion is like zoned a certain way already. And it's in the map, and it's in the CDMP. as a certain type of land already. And, you know, I think at some point our like environmental only master plan is going to like butt into the head of like, well, these guys actually wanted to build 12-story building on the river right there, right? Like, so, you know, I think we have to sort of think about like, what are the tools at our disposal to like pull some greenness out of the process in a way that's feasible. So I think we should be thinking about like what's feasible throughout this whole process as we're like preparing to set up a charrette to talk to you know, the people of the village and the stakeholders. Like, I know when we were doing the 2013 charrette, like it looks really cool with like a lot of 3-story buildings and stuff, but like they already had like 8 stories there. And so then when it goes, and Juan knows this because he worked on it, but like when it goes from like the charrette to the change the zoning code, then there's like kind of a disconnect, right? Because like the people who own the property don't necessarily really have to care about the charrette unless there's like some, you know, stick behind it. So that's my thinking about this. How do we do it in a way that is like how do we add the carrot, and how do we, you know, if we are going to rely on the council to enforce what we've designed, like we have to think about how that works and what happens, especially if they're like down zoning something.
Adam, you bring up the charrette that was done in, what was it, 13? You know, you're absolutely right, and there is, I don't think it's a disconnect. I think that there is a bridge, right, that it's hard to cross between the master plan that was done during that charrette and the zoning code. The mayor can tell you we use that charrette book quite often, actually. While the code is very specific about what you can and cannot do, but whenever we have someone that's interested in, for instance, the Little River, the Little Farm, we use that plan to show them what the thinking was. So, of course, that master plan was not, you know, it doesn't quite tell you what Z5 is, but at the same time, it gives people an understanding of what it should look like. So that's a good example, Elizabeth, of a master plan that doesn't have that much detail, but at the same time, it allows you to sort of read between the lines and communicate an idea of urbanism. So however short this master plan or this charrette comes of giving you enough detail, it'll still inform us as to how to implement and be actionable from that outcome. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me, and I agree with you. Like, I think the charrette was incredibly useful, you know, moving into like the change of the zoning code. But I guess my point is like, it's very difficult to take away something that's been given. And if you're gonna take something away in a sense of zoning, either you set yourself up for conflict with the owners, which you might be okay with, or you need to like figure out a way that there's a stick as well as a carrot that you can give them that entices them to accept it as you're offering it. And so, you know, I think a lot of the sites on the charrette were like, oh, like, wouldn't it be cool if we had like a treehouse park in this like private lot here? And you're like, yeah, that would be totally cool, but like then the city has to spend money to buy the park, right? Like, and the city doesn't have that many necessarily. So that's just all I'm sort of trying to get at, is like, if there's a stepped down, 4-story height limit along the river right now, like, how do we translate that into like a wetland, area? And I think at that point, it's like where the rubber meets the road. And I think it's more important to figure out, how do we prepare the council with the tools to ask for that in a way that is feasible. And that's what the end goal of this should be, because the council is sort of like our last hope at this point with the site plan approval, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think just from the initial impulse to bring this to this group and to the village to begin with, and looking at the opportunity, was not to create a pie in the sky, like unachievable kind of dream, right? It's like and I would say that one of the things that's changed since the first shred is like resilience concerns have been elevated, right? So there's a slightly different context to it right now, but I think that the primary value in this is giving, to Juan's point, is giving the village a fresh set of tools to try to get an outcome that is more in alignment, or sort of whatever the next generation outcome is, that is in alignment with all of the resilience future that we're facing, So I think how we do that is a question. And maybe from my point of view, like, maybe we start with working backwards from what is, if we just went with what is there today, like what's the zoning today? What is the site conditions at the moment? What does that mean for this idea? And then what would we have to change? What could we change? What makes the most sense? I don't know if anybody else has feedback, and I don't know, Omar, if you wanted to say something because your hand was up.
Yeah, well, I put it down because I was just going to kind of listen because I came in late. Well, I was just going to say, when you guys saw, if you guys saw my email earlier, the one where I informed you guys that I had another meeting, that email that I forwarded to you guys, the questions that were in there, were, what should be part of the charrette, what should, and how detailed should the charrette master plan be? Should items that are more detailed be handled through adjustments to the existing village code? Right. And so that's kind of like what I'm hearing is kind of like where you guys are right now. And then the last one was, what are the chronological steps of developing a master plan or charrette? Let's adjourn this meeting knowing exactly what our next step or steps should be that we must accomplish. I think that, like I was saying, what you guys are on right now is kind of, the stuff that we're talking about. If it's detailed enough, can it be handled through just looking at our existing code and zoning and saying, okay, we want to make our existing code and zoning more environmental, then we can adjust it like this. We can change this code like this. We can change this like this. And we can change the zoning like this. You guys can bring that straight to council. I'll be bringing it through the planning and zoning committee, straight to council, straight to committee, and we can move on that right away. Maybe that's one of the first steps. Maybe one of the first steps is we should look at the existing code and zoning and seeing how we can adjust it to make it more look how we want it to look. Maybe that's the first step.
So speaking of first steps, we only have 10 minutes left in this meeting, and I definitely want to leave the meeting with knowing what we're doing next to that point. And I have some comments on the baselines that everyone has set up and some things that the county are doing that will impact this work as well. But I can put that on hold because I think we need to know what next steps are. And I know that Camilla, the manager, and Hugh all have their hands up. So start with Camilla, and then we need to make sure we do have a plan when we leave this meeting for sure.
Thank you. No, I just wanted to add that the comprehensive plan was recently modified and adopted with a new resilience element that already supports a lot of the goals that you're expressing now, so that the village can have that as support for this endeavor. And also the action adaptation area, the AAA that the county has done, it's broad, but the village can also take that and just zero in on the more detailed recommendations that would apply to the Little River area of El Portal directly. So with these two documents, you already have a lot of the framework and support that you would need for this to keep going with this plan. So
Awesome.
just to remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That's a
I
great
was only
reminder.
going to mention that the 2013 charrette, we use it all the time. There is a way to just expand on that with these documents. I think it's just a matter of aligning everything together, utilize this in the new charrette, because it's really, vital and it's still a living document that will just enhance what you're going to do here. That's all.
Thank you, Madam Manager. And just really quickly to build off Camilla's comment about the CDMP, and we have the 8 adaptation action area plan, but El Portal is about to be, and I mentioned this on our last task force meeting, in the county's reasonable assurance plan, which I think will take probably in people's day-to-day lives precedent in the county over the AA action plan. And I know that the mayor and manager, and I'm going to attend as well, have a meeting on that tomorrow. And that is going to be, I think, a really good source of funding for these projects as well. So we can talk about that next week, but it's definitely something we should.
I was going to say, can we brief that? Can we be briefed on that next week so that we have that as part of the, yeah,
we did a brief discussion about it, I think like 1-2 meetings ago, but I have a lot more information now since that meeting, so we can definitely talk about that. And then Mr. Gladwin, you have your hand up too.
Yeah, I don't really have time to say this, but I'm kind of having a little bit of negative reaction to all this right now in terms of kind of the vision that I think I got from Colin and also Kat about sort of what we're doing. I mean, we're talking about an environmental master plan. The word environmental to me means, the science, what's going on. I mean, that's what so impressed me about Colin when I first met him, that he is talking about designs, but designs that incorporate total knowledge of the ecology and ecosystems, and then in terms of programming, Kat has come along. She's like a world-class ecologist and implementing programs of that, so I don't think we want to have a sort of plain old master plan that designs stuff based on without incorporating the science. And, on that, I'm also very concerned about the flood situation. I've spent now 3 years observing. I think you don't know about how flooding works until you measure it under conditions of actual flooding. And you measure where the water is going and you measure the quantities. And, it was kind of like amazing what happened 3 weeks ago when I backed up the Hurricane Eta measurements. And I can tell you that the current stormwater plan is not working at all. It's a complete waste of money right now, simply because it doesn't function on any kind of current flood situation. So I won't say any more on that. I've been working on a report, and I'm going to try to get it done this week. It'll be like the third of the Little River Conservancy's floodwater reports. But these all say to me that we have to go beyond the normal planning process, which just looks like new forms, new structures, new funding, to look at the underlying science that's going on of this fragile ecosystem of the river and everything else. That's my kind of shout out.
Well, that raises a really fundamental, there are 2 questions I think that I would ask the group. So are we as a committee, in agreement that we want to move forward on something? And then the question is it an environmental master plan? Is it what is it? Right. So I don't have the answer to that, but I'm asking the question. I think it's something that we maybe want to discuss at the next meeting, like on a fundamental level.
Yeah, I think that can be the first step to the plan, right? Is outlining the exact scope of the plan. And just quick comment, on Hugh's point about the flooding, I think the areas of concern that in that presentation are not encompassing all the areas of concern, just based on having experienced concerns.
Yeah, well, having come off 86th Street, like if we're talking, so I think that's another question. Colin, in like 1 minute, can you just talk about why you've pinned those areas? And then I think the committee has to decide whether or not those are the right areas of interest or whether or not that needs to be expanded. But can you
Maybe
talk?
we can table that, Kristen, because we only have 5 minutes left.
Okay.
Maybe table that for like the substantive discussion of,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, so that
And
would be
I know why you flooded in that area you're talking about, Elizabeth. So
Yeah, my house is, as
let me
I,
tell you, I finally figured it out.
oh, okay, great.
So maybe that's
so-
a bullet for the agenda, right?
Right,
Is to
exactly.
discuss,
next
do we
week.
have the right, what are we trying to do and what is the scope of what we're like
Yes.
geographically, what we want to talk about? Yeah.
So maybe you just answer the question. That's the next steps, right? So maybe the next step is answering those 2 questions. What is the scope of this? And what was the second question you said, Kristen? Sorry.
Well, sort of, is it an environmental plan? Is it an update? I mean, is it is it an urban, a kind of resilience or whatever, next generation charrette to build on what we've already done, sort of more of a typical process, and then also, are we looking, what do we want to include as areas of interest or concern, within the plan?
Okay. So opening to I feel like those things aren't necessarily mutually exclusive either. I think we can build off of the 2013 plan, but still it doesn't have to fit within, the same confines of that. So for those of you that have been involved in more of these charrettes, does anyone have any suggestions as to how we should proceed? Should we have another task force meeting focused just on this, where we have an agenda where we answer, 2 questions instead of doing this, this background work, or and then address it as the task force, but before we move to, public workshops or what? Yeah, I'll open the floor up. Colin.
Yeah, I think it's important that everybody get aligned on what the priorities are and what that order is and what we're trying to achieve before this moves anywhere to the public realm. And quickly, areas of interest and problematic areas. There are areas of interest that can relieve areas of that are currently having issues. So there's a correlation there that needs to be vetted out by the group. And I'll also say that, yeah, some of the information that I presented is what we have, and this is a developing situation. So what information that was presented today has Hugh developed, or are there other components that have been developed that or other expertise that can be shedded on these situations that actually pivot us in a different direction?
More discovery, right?
Perfect.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think that we laid, you have to understand where you're at before you can figure out where you're going. So this is really helpful. But I guess, again, so thank you guys. Thank you, all 3 of you, all 5 of you, everybody, all 10 of us for doing all the work on this. Should we schedule another special task force meeting to answer this question?
I think so. Yeah.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Madam Chair, if the task force feels that you guys had the first opening up meeting and introduction meeting, and you feel that you kind of know the direction you want to go as far as what questions you have to ask, then if you want to, you guys can move it to the regular scheduled task force meetings. If you feel like even at the end of this meeting that there's still there's still many more questions than answers, even as far as the direction of questions that you want to go into, then we will probably need at least one more special meeting just for the charrette.
I think we could use another special meeting based on the breadth, the amount of information that we have. Seems like the team agrees. Okay. All right. So that's our next step. And the big question we're going to try to answer that is, what is this? The exact scope of what this master plan will encompass.
Madam Chair, is there a particular date that, first of all, do you feel that for the next step, would you need, again, for Serbia or Mr. Thampi or the village manager? And for the next step, is there a particular date that you guys want to look at right now and get that next special meeting down on the calendar? Madam Chair?
I will defer to the group on scheduling. I don't know what the task force schedules look like.
Wednesdays at 4 is a particularly good time for me. So if we could hold a Wednesdays at 4,
So what about, do you guys want to do it on the 27th? Or would you guys? want some-
I'm available. I don't know what,
So we do have a regularly scheduled task force meeting on the 20th.
yeah, it would be
Yeah,
3 weeks,
next
3
week.
weeks in a row. We'd be meeting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it'd be 3 weeks in a row. So if you guys want to hit it, like hit the second one right now, as quickly as possible, that'd be the 27th. If you guys want to give yourself a little bit of breathing room, trying to think about it, we can do August 3rd or August 10th.
Matthew, what's up with you? Are you in Chicago now?
Yeah, I'm in Chicago, but I'm actually traveling around about that time. But I could still probably jump on a call, maybe, depending on what it is. But yeah, I mean, just really recapping it, I totally agree. I think we got to understand what this document's trying to do before we start crafting it. So I think we definitely need one more meeting to kind of just focus on that mainly.
So we have.
Yeah, I agree. You should have one more meeting because you need to prioritize the issues. What do you want to look at first? And from what I gather, it's like flooding is a big issue. So if it's a future plan, a master plan you are creating, you have to prioritize what are the first things you need to fix first before you go into, all the next steps. But I think, like I said, flooding is an issue. I mean, if you want to do all the landscaping and all this stuff, you have to. But anyway, we can discuss.
Yeah.
Bring
Well, I think the
priority
idea
to
is
the
that
next
could
meeting.
we do a landscape that helps with flooding? I think that's kind of
And water quality.
the key,
Yes.
couple of key questions.
Are we looking
Okay,
at?
so the question I think is really the 27th or the 3rd.
I can do either.
Okay. Anyone else have either one of those days they can't do?
What would you say, the 23rd or the 3rd?
Sorry, the
27th.
27th of July or the August 3rd?
I could probably do the 27th.
Okay, that's fine with me. I have availability then. Do I hear any objections? See some thumbs up. Okay, all right.
And,
So,
and Madam Chair, if I may, Madam Chair.
of course.
The second question would be for the 27th. Do you all feel like you have enough information to where for that meeting we don't necessarily need Juan and Camilla from Preserbia, Mr. Thampi, or the village manager? Or is there individuals that you still want at that meeting also?
I think it would be great to have Preserbia join, because if we want to dig into questions of what the existing code says and zoning, it would be great to have some.
Were they involved in the previous charrette, the 2013? Was that them?
No, it wasn't. We weren't.
Oh,
but
They weren't around yet.
But they
But we have a-
translated it into the zoning code. So
Okay, right.
it's, they know it very well.
Adam is the responsible one for the previous work.
Blame you.
So if we can just blame him instead of me.
I'll take it. But I think one thing that might be sort of interesting, and I know this is like we're running up against our time, but like I've seen some things coming out of the planning department, like the resilient streets plan, the septic to sewer, and all of these plans. And I think they all deserve to be packaged together and put forward to the community in a way that maybe this charrette is the right time to do that. If we're gonna just look at, the little farm and nearby buildings, then that's one thing. But if we're doing a El Portal resilience plan, I think we should like loop in a lot of this other stuff that we've seen, and maybe, go beyond just environmental resilience, but like housing resilience and flooding, hurricane resilience, things like that. But I'm sorry. That's just
Well, I think we'll have to discuss on it. I mean, I think that should be part of our conversation is timing and scope. It's all part of that conversation, right?
Yep, I think that's exactly right. Okay, so we'll schedule for the 27th then, 4 p.m. to 5:30, the usual time. And then anything, we're out of time, so it's 5:35, but any other, I know we have a lot to talk about still. But
I think we should organize, I'm sorry, Omar, to have to do this to you, but I think we should use you as a clearinghouse to try to figure out what kind of materials we want to pull together and information we want to pull together for an efficient meeting. in advance, right? Which means we all have to tell you, and then you have to feed it back to us as a circle or whatever.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
can I suggest, why don't everybody put down in writing what their priorities are and send it, who is the, the chair?
We
Somebody
can't, the problem with Sunshine is we can't talk to each other. We have to actually only send to Omar. So
Oh.
Omar has to become the clearinghouse for whatever, we need.
Yeah, I mean, after you get them, you can put a priority list and
Yeah.
see, people
I
can.
think that's a really
discuss.
good idea. If everyone kind of writes down what they think the scope and priority should be, then we can basically have like a big brainstorming session at the next one where we put all those up on a screen, and figure out which ones are going to be encompassed or we want.
And also if there's key information or key documents that we need to review that we haven't yet reviewed on in the public record, that we can have those made available to us as well.
Yeah, I'm going to send a few things to the mayor to circulate to you guys about like the RAP and some of that other stuff as well. But obviously we can't communicate with them, but you will have them from my end at least. But you're right, there's a lot of stuff.
And if it would be possible to get some examples of charrettes, or, I mean, I know we're quite unique, but just understanding what kind of topics are covered. I don't know if anyone is able to send a few of those through to just kind of prompt ideas.
Yeah, could we have the 2013 charrette? Is there a digital copy of that?
It's posted on the village website. I think we never paid for the final $30,000 to the county to get them to take draft off it, but it's done. Seriously.
Is that, sorry, Matthew, is that sufficient, or you want?
Well,
like,
yeah, that, and then if anyone knows of any other municipalities across the world even that have maybe approached this, and it doesn't have to be purely environmental, just how they've approached maybe looking at their village or their urban environment in a new way. It'd be helpful.
Would the folks at Pluservia, would you have an example like that you could send us?
Yes, I was thinking of Key Biscayne. They just did a week-long charrette, and it's a much larger area, but it's a great example to see what they covered every day and how they handled it. It was a full day every day. I went there with the county, so we can share that. Yeah.
The earlier charrette that we did in El Portal in 1999 was had a huge impact. And I guess I'll send everybody, I'll send out the report for that, and maybe it's kind of in the same sort of semi-state as the one for the 213, but maybe we could put it on the village website also.
Hey guys, I'm sorry, but I have to be someplace in 5 minutes, so I'm gonna need to jump off. Do we need to?
Yeah, I think we have to, that would be our quorum anyway, so we have to, but we're already 10 minutes over. So I think everything, everyone knows their directives. So can I get a motion to adjourn unless anyone has any final comments?
I motion to adjourn the meeting.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, great. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Perfect. We are officially adjourned at 5:39 p.m.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Pluservia. Thank
Guys,
you,
for
Village,
great
for joining.
Guys,
Thank you.
take care. Bye-bye.
Oh, now we're still here. And now it's just gonna